The Skyline Terrace in downtown, Chicago glittered, like a jewel suspended above the city that never truly slept. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering skyline, the Willis Tower piercing the night like a silver blade. Lake Michigan, a dark mirror reflecting thousands of lights. Inside, the air carried the rich scent of expensive perfume, aged whiskey, and fresh orchids arranged in towering centerpieces. Soft jazz floated from a live quartet tucked in the corner, a sultry saxophone weaving through piano chords. The gentle brush of drums, the occasional warm thump of an upright bass. Crystal glasses clinked in toasts. Laughter rose and fell in elegant waves. Tonight was supposed to be perfect. I stood near the center of the room in an emerald green silk gown that hugged my curves, before cascading into a subtle train. The fabric caught the light every time I moved, shifting from deep forest to shimmering jade. Damon had chosen it himself, 3 weeks earlier during one of our rare, peaceful shopping trips. "It matches your eyes when you're happy," he'd said, kissing my temple. I had believed him. 7 years. 7 years of quiet devotion, of biting my tongue during family dinners, of smiling through thinly veiled insults about my background, my skin tone, my ambition. 7 years of building a home that looked flawless from the outside, while I quietly collected every promotion, every certification, every late-night project that brought me closer to this moment. Tonight the board had officially announced it. Ebony Wells, Director of Planning for Pinnacle Properties, one of the largest real estate development firms in the Midwest. A 6-figure salary bump, a corner office on the 42nd floor, a team of 12 reporting directly to me. I was 34 years old, and I had finally arrived. I moved through the crowd accepting congratulations. Colleagues hugged me. Clients raised their glasses. My CEO, Mr. Vance, a silver-haired man in his late 50s with kind eyes and an even kinder reputation, watched me with genuine pride. Even my in-laws appeared to be behaving. Mrs. Sterling, I had never been allowed to call her anything warmer, wore her usual armor of pearls and icy smiles. Mr. Sterling nursed a scotch in silence. The 2 sisters-in-law, Clara and Beatrice, whispered behind manicured hands but kept their voices low. Damon stayed close, his arm occasionally brushing mine. He had been drinking steadily since we arrived, more than usual. I noticed, but his smile remained in place. I told myself it was pride making him flush, not liquor. Then Mr. Vance tapped his glass with a spoon. The room quieted almost instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice carrying easily over the soft music, "if I may have your attention for just a moment." Heads turned, conversations died. All eyes moved toward our table. Tonight we celebrate not just a promotion, but a remarkable individual who has earned every bit of recognition coming her way. He turned to me, smile widening. Ebony Wells has been with Pinnacle for 7 years. In that time, she has consistently demonstrated intelligence, creativity, strategic brilliance, and most importantly, an unbreakable will. Projects under her leadership have generated hundreds of millions in revenue. Communities have been transformed. And tonight, I am beyond proud to introduce her as our new Director of Planning. Applause erupted, warm, genuine, sustained. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, a mixture of joy and disbelief. Mr. Vance wasn't finished. He stepped closer to Damon and placed a friendly hand on his shoulder. "Damon, my friend, you are a lucky man. You've married a diamond, one who shines brighter every year. Treasure her, support her, because women like Ebony don't come along often." More applause, whistles, someone shouted, "Well said!" I turned to Damon, eyes shining, ready to share this perfect moment. That was when I saw it. His face hadn't moved into a smile. His jaw was locked. His eyes, those same eyes I had once thought warm and loving, burned with something. Dark and unfamiliar, jealousy, rage, humiliation. His fingers tightened around the stem of his wine glass until I thought the crystal would shatter. Mrs. Sterling leaned in. I couldn't hear her words, but I saw her lips move close to his ear, saw her hand pat the back of his knuckles in slow, deliberate encouragement, like someone stoking coals that were already glowing red. Damon stood abruptly. The chair scraped loudly against the polished floor. Heads turned again, this time with confusion rather than celebration. He swayed slightly, enough alcohol in him now that his balance wasn't steady. He crossed the short distance to me in 3 long strides. His breath hit my face, hot and sour with wine. "So you're brilliant now?" His voice came out low at first, then rose sharply. "Big boss lady, everyone clapping for you, and me? I'm just the idiot husband standing in your shadow, right?" "Damon," I reached for his arm, voice low, pleading. People are watching. You've had too much. Please sit down. He jerked away so violently my hand stung. Too much? He shouted. The room went deathly quiet. Even the jazz faltered for a beat before recovering. I see everything clearly. I've spent 7 years listening to people whisper how my wife is smarter than me, how she makes more money, how she's the real success story. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? My heart hammered against my ribs. Heat flooded my face, my dark skin hiding the flush but not the shame. I looked toward his family, silently begging for someone, anyone, to intervene. Mr. Sterling stared at his glass. Clara and Beatrice exchanged glances, lips curved in tiny, satisfied smiles. Mrs. Sterling sat with arms crossed, watching like a queen watching an execution. And then it happened. The slap came without warning, open palm, full force, cracking across my left cheek. The sound echoed sharper than any gunshot. My head snapped sideways. Pain exploded across my face, immediate and blinding. I stumbled, high heels catching on the hem of my gown. My hip hit the edge of a table. Glasses wobbled. A champagne flute tipped and shattered on the marble. I fell. The cold floor rushed up to meet me. My temple struck the corner of the table leg, sharp, bright pain blooming behind my eyes. For several endless seconds, I couldn't breathe. The room spun. Gasps rippled outward like waves. Someone cried out. I tasted blood where my lip had split against my teeth. Above me, Damon loomed, chest heaving, face twisted into something unrecognizable. I waited for the next blow. None came, not yet, because horrified colleagues surged forward, grabbing his arms, pulling him back. That was when Mrs. Sterling spoke. Her voice sliced through the stunned silence like a blade. Teach her a lesson so she learns. No outrage, no shock, just cold, deliberate venom. What good is all that talent? She continued, loud enough for half the room to hear. It only brings misfortune to her husband. She can be the brightest woman in the world out there, but at home, she's nothing but a wife. I lay on the floor, cheek throbbing, tears burning tracks down my temples, and felt something inside me break cleanly in two. Not just my marriage, my illusion. The illusion that 7 years of patience, of swallowing pride, of playing the perfect daughter-in-law, had earned me anything at all. In that abyss of pain and humiliation, my shaking fingers found my clutch. The phone inside, screen cracked from the fall but still glowing. I didn't call security. I didn't call the police. I called the one person who had never once made me feel small. Gavin, I whispered through tears when he answered on the first ring. Please help me. His voice, deep, calm, steady as always, came through like an anchor in a storm. Where are you? Skyline Terrace. He hit me. In front of everyone. A pause. Then quietly lethal. Stay where you are. I'm coming. I didn't know then that heaven wouldn't save me that night. My brother would, and that the nightmare was only beginning. The bathroom door slammed behind me with a finality that echoed in my skull. Marble tiles were cold against my knees. I collapsed there, back pressed to the door, as if my body weight alone could keep the world out. My reflection stared back from the full-length mirror opposite the sink's unnatural curls. Exploding from their elegant updo, emerald gown twisted and stained with spilled champagne, left cheek already purpling beneath rich brown skin, lower lip split and bleeding steadily onto the silk. I looked like a woman who had been pulled from a car wreck instead of a celebration. 7 years. 7 years of apologies I never should have made. 7 years of he's just stressed. He didn't mean it. It won't happen again. 7 years of long sleeves in summer to hide fingerprints, of concealer layered like war paint, of smiling through family dinners while bruises bloomed underneath. I had told myself it was love. I had told myself I was building something unbreakable. Now I sat on a public bathroom floor, realizing the only thing unbreakable had been my denial. My phone buzzed once, cracked screen flickering. A text from an unknown number. Stay exactly where you are. Black SUV pulling up at the service entrance in 7 minutes. Gavin. No questions. No platitudes. Just instructions. I wiped blood from my lip with the back of my hand, stood on trembling legs and moved to the sink. Cold water stung the cut. I rinsed my mouth, dabbed at my cheek with paper towels, tried to smooth my hair. Pointless gestures. There was no salvaging dignity tonight. When I slipped out through the staff corridor, the noise of the party had already resumed, jazz playing again, laughter forced and brittle. No one stopped me. No one asked if I was all right. They had already chosen sides. The service elevator took me to the loading dock. A black Escalade waited, engine idling, tinted windows opaque. The rear door opened before I reached it. Gavin stepped out. He was taller than I remembered. 6'3" at least, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked both expensive and ready for violence. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, dark brown like mine, scanned me head to toe in one brutal second. They lingered on the swelling cheek, the split lip, the way I cradled my right elbow where it had taken the brunt of the fall. He didn't speak. He simply opened his arms. I walked straight into them. The hug was brief, fierce, wordless. He smelled like cedar and gun oil, comforting and dangerous at once. Then he guided me into the back seat, slid in beside me, and the door closed with a soft, expensive thud. The driver, a man I didn't recognize, pulled away without a word. We rode in silence for the first 10 minutes. Streetlights flashed across Gavin's face in rhythmic pulses. Finally he spoke, voice low and even. "How bad?" I swallowed. Face, lip, head hit the table. "Nothing broken, I think." He reached into the center console, pulled out a small medical kit, and began cleaning the cut on my lip with antiseptic wipes. His hands, scarred across the knuckles, were surprisingly gentle. "You kept this from me," he said quietly. "Not an accusation, a statement." "I was ashamed," I whispered. And I thought I could fix him. Gavin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more until we reached the building. A sleek, modern tower on the Gold Coast, with private underground parking and a doorman, who didn't blink at my appearance. The elevator ride was silent. Gavin's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors. When the doors opened directly into the foyer, I froze. It was beautiful, minimalist, masculine, all clean lines and dark wood, but it smelled like safety, like home in a way my own house never had. He led me to a guest suite already prepared. Fresh towels, a robe, painkillers and ice packs on the nightstand, a change of clothes in my size laid out on the bed. Someone had anticipated everything. "Shower," he said. "Change. Then come to the living room. There's soup on the warmer." I obeyed because arguing felt impossible. Hot water stung every abrasion, but it also washed away champagne, blood, and the last traces of mascara. When I emerged in soft black leggings and an oversized cashmere sweater, the swelling on my cheek had worsened. But I felt marginally more human. Gavin waited in the living room, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. 2 mugs of soup steamed on the coffee table. He didn't turn when I entered. "Sit," he said. I sank onto the sofa. He joined me, handing me ibuprofen and water first. Then he spoke. "I want the truth, all of it, from the first time." So I told him. The first shove, a year into the marriage, Damon drunk after a bad day at work, me nagging about the empty bottles, the way he'd cried afterward, promised it would never happen again. The second time, 3 months later, because I questioned a late night. The third, when I asked why so much money was disappearing from our joint account. Each incident followed the same script. Explosion, violence, remorse, gifts, sex, promises, and me, always me, forgiving because I loved him, because I believed change was possible, because admitting the truth meant admitting I had chosen wrong. Gavin listened without interrupting. When I finished, silence stretched so long I thought he might never speak again. Finally, "I investigated him before you married." My head snapped up. "What?" "Background check. Deep one. Gambling debts from college he'd paid off. Temper reports from 2 ex-girlfriends. Nothing criminal, but red flags. I showed you the summary, light version. You said you loved him. You said he was different with you." I remembered that conversation. Remembered dismissing it as overprotectiveness. "I should have pushed harder," he said. "I should have dragged you away. My biggest failure." "Gavin, no." His voice cracked. The first time I'd heard it do that since we were children. "You're my sister. The only family I have left. And I let you walk into that house." Tears burned my eyes again. "You couldn't have known." "I knew enough." He stood, paced to the window, hands clenched behind his back. "I built everything I have so no one could ever hurt you again," he said quietly. "The security firm, the other businesses, the connections, all of it, and still I failed." I rose, crossed to him, touched his arm. "You didn't fail. You're here now." He turned then, eyes fierce. "From tonight forward, no one touches you again. Not Damon, not his mother, not anyone. Understood?" I nodded. He exhaled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "There's more." He pulled out his phone, opened a secure app, and handed it to me. An anonymous message, time-stamped 40 minutes ago. "Damon Sterling has been embezzling from Pinnacle for 18 months. Wire transfers routed through shell companies. Evidence attached. He's in deep with loan sharks. Montgomery is pulling the strings. Wants. Pinnacle weakened, so he can acquire it cheap. Your husband is the fall guy. Attached. Bank statements, emails, grainy photos of Damon meeting a man I recognized. Director Montgomery, my company's biggest competitor. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Embezzlement? My voice sounded distant. Damon? Gavin took the phone back. I've had people watching him for months. Didn't know about the embezzlement until tonight. But the rest, the gambling, the debts, that's why he snapped. You getting promoted was the last straw. He's drowning, and he took it out on you. I sank back onto the sofa. They're going to blame me, his family, the company, everyone. Not if we move first. A knock at the private elevator. Gavin crossed to it, checked the monitor, then opened the door. A middle-aged woman in a white coat stepped inside. Kind eyes. Calm demeanor, medical bag in hand. Dr. Lowe, Gavin said. Thank you for coming so quickly. She smiled gently at me. Miss Wells, Mr. Gavin asked me to check your injuries. The examination was thorough but kind. Soft tissue bruising, mild concussion possible, no fractures. She noted older marks on my upper arms, faded yellow-green, fingerprints, and said nothing. Only looked at me with quiet sorrow. When she finished, she packed her bag slowly. Silence feeds evil, she said softly. The longer you tolerate it, the bolder it becomes. You're safe here, but you must decide what you want next. She left as quietly as she'd arrived. Gavin sat across from me again. Tomorrow we start planning, divorce, asset division, criminal complaint for assault. And we look into this embezzlement. If it's true, Damon goes down, and he takes Montgomery with him. I nodded numbly. But even then, in the cocoon of Gavin's protection, a small cold voice whispered, what if the anonymous message isn't help? What if it's bait? I pushed the thought away. I was too tired to chase shadows tonight. Tomorrow, though. Tomorrow I would start asking questions. And the answers, I feared, would be far worse than any slap. The morning after the courthouse settlement felt strangely hollow. I woke in Gavin's guest suite to sunlight slicing through half-closed blinds, painting gold bars across the charcoal duvet. My phone, new one, courtesy of Gavin, showed no missed calls from Damon, no texts from his sisters, no venomous messages from Mrs. Sterling, just silence. The kind of silence that follows a bomb going off. Everything shattered, nothing left to say. The divorce was final. I had full custody of our 5-year-old son. Liam, though Damon, had barely mentioned him in 7 years, and even less since the promotion night. I had the majority of our liquid assets, the downtown condo, which I intended to sell immediately, spousal support for 3 years, and a 6-figure settlement for intentional infliction of emotional distress and battery. Attorney Hart had been ruthless in negotiations. The Sterlings hadn't even tried to fight. They knew the criminal assault charges were pending, knew the embezzlement investigation was circling, knew Montgomery's arrest had removed their last shield. Yet victory tasted like ash, because Montgomery's last words in the VIP room of the Onyx Lounge still echoed. Go ask my good brother. He will give you the answer. We had traced good brother to Felix Moreau, restaurant magnate, longtime silent partner of Montgomery's shell companies, and frequent dinner companion of Attorney Hart, when Gavin showed me the surveillance photos of Hart and Felix meeting in discreet corners of the city, something inside me cracked again. I refused to believe it at first. Hart had fought for me. She had held my hand through depositions, reviewed every bruise photo with quiet fury, promised me justice. But the more I stared at those photos, the way her hand rested on Felix's forearm, the way they leaned close over coffee, the more the doubt grew roots. I confronted her alone. Her office smelled of bergamot and old books. When I laid the photo on her desk without preamble, she didn't flinch. She simply closed the door, dimmed the lights, and sat across from me like a woman finally relieved to stop pretending. I knew you'd find out eventually, she said. Sit. She told me everything. Her mother and Montgomery's father were siblings. A bitter inheritance dispute decades earlier had ended with Montgomery's father forging documents, driving her mother into bankruptcy, and, most cruelly, into an early grave from a broken heart and untreated depression. Hart had grown up on stories of that betrayal. She became a lawyer for one reason, to dismantle the Montgomery empire piece by piece. When your case landed on my desk, she continued, I saw the connection immediately. Sterling family tied to Montgomery through gambling debts and embezzlement. You tied to Sterling through marriage. Gavin tied to Sterling through, well, the accident. You were the perfect lever. I felt the room tilt. You used me. I helped you, she corrected gently. And yes, I used the momentum you created. Montgomery was going to fall eventually. Your pain just made it happen faster. She slid an old manila folder across the desk. Inside, yellowed documents, faded photographs, a family tree drawn in careful blue ink. The tree showed 2 branches merging at the grandparent level. Montgomery's mother and Gavin's mother were sisters. Gavin and Montgomery were first cousins. The feud hadn't started with the accident. It started 1 generation earlier. Montgomery's father, call him Victor, had loved Gavin's mother first. She chose Gavin's father instead. Victor never forgave. Envy turned to obsession, then to murder. He orchestrated the brake sabotage on the truck. Liberty Logistics assigned to Mr. Sterling that rainy night 20 years ago. Mr. Sterling, young, inexperienced, terrified, panicked, and fled. But the crash wasn't his fault alone. It was Victor's design. Victor used his own son, Montgomery, as the tool, ordering the sabotage, then covering it up. The good brother Montgomery spoke of in his dying confession wasn't Felix. It was Victor himself, the man who had been like an uncle to Gavin's father, the man who attended birthday parties, sent Christmas cards, loaned money during lean years, the man who then arranged to kill his best friend and sister-in-law out of jealousy over a woman he could never have. I stared at the final document, a grainy photocopy of a hospital birth record. A crescent moon birthmark behind the right ear. My birthmark. The record showed I had been born to Gavin's mother, not adopted into the family home as I'd always believed, but stolen hours after delivery. Victor had arranged the switch. He took the legitimate child, me, and left a changeling in my place, all to punish Gavin's father, by denying him the full inheritance that would pass through the female line. The fortune our grandmother had left was tied to bloodline succession. By stealing the rightful heir, Victor ensured the money would eventually circle back to his side. Through manipulation and time, I wasn't adopted. I was kidnapped, and the woman I called Mom, until she died, had raised someone else's child while her own was hidden in the system, later adopted by strangers, until fate, or Victor's long game, brought me back into the orbit of the families that had destroyed each other for generations. I left Hart's office in a daze. Gavin was waiting outside in the car. He took one look at my face and knew. We drove to the lakefront in silence. Wind-off Michigan whipped my hair. When we stopped at a deserted stretch of promenade, I handed him the folder. He read every page without expression. When he reached the birth certificate, his hands began to shake. "I'm your cousin," I said quietly. "Not your sister. Not by blood. They stole me from your mother. Victor did it. To hurt your father. To steal the inheritance." Gavin closed the folder. For a long moment he stared at the water. "I spent 20 years hating the wrong man," he said at last. "I terrorized the Sterlings. I built an empire so I could crush them. And the real monster was family." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "I almost killed Damon last week. In that house. I had the loan sharks ready. I was going to let them loose on the whole family." I touched his arm. "You didn't. Because of you." We sat there until sunset bled red across the lake. Later that night, back in the penthouse, Gavin made a decision. He called off the hostile takeover of Montgomery's crumbling empire. Instead, he turned every piece of evidence, the dashcam video, Mr. Bridges' testimony, Hart's dossier, the birth records, over to the Illinois state attorney's office as a cold case homicide package. Victor was already dead, cancer. 5 years earlier, but the truth would come out. The media would feast. The Sterling name would be dragged through the mud again. This time not for my humiliation, but for Mr. Sterling's cowardice in fleeing the scene. Damon would face embezzlement charges regardless. The feds had taken over after Montgomery's confession. And me? I kept Liam. I kept my job. Pinnacle's board issued a formal apology for not intervening sooner and gave me 6 months paid leave to recover. I sold the condo, bought a smaller place near the lake with a yard for Liam. I started therapy. Not to forgive Damon, but to forgive myself for staying so long. Gavin sold half his security firm. The other businesses, the ones that lived in gray areas, were quietly wound down. He kept enough to stay comfortable, but the empire of vengeance was dismantled. We never called each other brother and sister the same way again. The word carried too much weight now, too much history, too much pain. But we remained family. The kind forged not by blood, but by survival. One evening, months later, Liam and I sat on the new balcony watching the city lights. Gavin came over with takeout, Thai, extra spicy, the way I liked it. Liam climbed into his lap, asked him to read the dinosaur book for the 100th time. Gavin did, voice low and steady. When Liam fell asleep against his chest, Gavin looked at me over the small head. "You kept me human," he said quietly. I smiled, small, tired, real. You kept me alive. The jazz from a distant rooftop drifted up on the wind. Not the same song from that night at Skyline Terrace. Something softer, something hopeful. The storm had passed, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the quiet that followed.